If you want to learn all the concepts on the task list and be able to study and remember everything, this is the video for you. Hi, my name is Ray. I am officially a board certified behavior analyst. I have some tips that will help you pass your BCBA exam, some study tips. Now, this is for all those who are currently studying or have thoughts about studying, and you're going out and you're like, let me buy all of these cute highlighters and gel pens, and I'm about to reread, and I'm about to have all my flashcards. Yeah, you might want to watch this video first so you don't make the same beginner mistakes that I made when I was in my little beginner stages of studying. Now, a little background about me. Reading and studying has never come easy for me. I have always been someone who was really good at memorizing. I am so good at memorizing. I made it through high school, junior high and high school, just based off of pure memorization. And I got some good grades, but when you are studying for this exam, you can't. There is no such thing as taking this exam and just memorizing all the words and the concepts, because it's just not gonna happen like that. So I really had to go in depth and actually learn how to study, which was one of my biggest fears of all time. I avoided a lot of career fields because there was always that final exam that you had to take to become licensed or certified, and this was like one of the biggest fears of my life, going all the way through school, having to get certified and failing every single time. So I'm with you. That's a little background. Now, one of the things that really helped me learn and study was a tip called active recall. So I've learned that in the beginning stages of my study practices, I was doing a lot of passive studying, which is rereading the same stuff over and over and over again, which is highlighting paragraphs. Mind you, this is a big book to try to read and understand. So when you're going through, and my book is so dirty, I'm so sorry, but when you're going through, I don't know if you can see the highlighted parts and just highlighting stuff. And I learned my lesson quick on this book, but not quick enough on this book, because this book is like highlighted at every point. Let me see, highlighters, highlights, ooh, highlights, more highlights, more highlights. I didn't learn anything. I was just trying to memorize a lot of concepts, but then when it came to me taking those mock exams, that's when I'm like, I literally don't know anything, and I feel so stupid because I'm trying. I felt like in that moment I was learning so much information, and I was not learning anything whatsoever. So active recall. So active recall is a method of learning in which you are consistently testing yourself. So rather than constantly just rereading the same paragraph over and over, you'll read the paragraph, close the book, and ask yourself, what in the world did I just read? And then you'll break it down. If you can't close that book and be like, what did I just read? And really like break it down, not verbatim of the paragraph, but in your own words. What did you just read? You probably didn't learn nothing. You probably got to go back and reread that paragraph again. The downside of this, you guys, is it's such a slow process. Oh my God. You would be reading the same page for like an hour if you, okay, so another side note, I'm a slow reader. So some people, y'all can read fast. I'm not a fast reader. It takes me about, okay, this book, these pages are huge. Okay, that page is not going to be difficult to read. A page like this page and this page would take me a good like 20 minutes to read and understand what I'm reading. Now I can skim through all of this within a minute or two. I can skim it, but I probably didn't learn anything. So when I'm like actively trying to read, when you move over to a paragraph that really has some good details in it, to read that and close the book and be like, what did I just read? And if you don't know what you just read, you got to go back and reread that whole paragraph again. I'm not telling you to start there, so don't think that's all I'm asking you to do, because that's not where you start. What I did to make this big book more manageable to make this more understandable and to digest this a lot more, what I did was I go to the chapter, the summary of the chapter. So in the back of each chapter, there's a summary, and it breaks down everything that goes on within the chapter itself. So I would read each part of each little paragraph that they have, and then each paragraph, every time I would read it, that's introducing you to what the whole chapter is about. So when you're not just diving in and confused, like, oh my God, this is so complex and I don't know what they're talking about. Well, this is a broken down paragraph about the bulk of what the chapter is. You can read these simple definitions, because when you're going through the chapters, it's going to be like paragraphs on top of paragraphs describing one, or maybe like either a whole paragraph describing one or just two, and they're going to have like a backstory with examples. And if you just want to introduce and get your little feet wet, you read this first. So it will be the imperialism, the objective observation of a phenomenon of interest. You're going to be like, what does that even mean? The objective observation of a phenomenon of interest. Okay, you don't know what that means. So this is step 2. After you read through each paragraph individually and you're asking yourself questions, what does that mean? Then you get out a piece of paper. This is what I did. I get out a piece of paper and I start writing questions about everything I did not understand. Again, I'm only reading the summary part. I'm reading the summary part. I don't understand majority of this because this is my first time reading it. I don't know what this information is. So I'm writing down questions. I'm writing down what is each assumption. So I'm writing it down. They have the replication. They have the parsimony. I'm writing it down. Well, what is parsimony? How do you know it's parsimony? This is questions. When do I use parsimony? I'm just writing questions because I don't know what it is, so I'm trying to figure it out. Write as many questions that you can. Try to use like the how, the what, the when questions, because the idea is whenever you go back and you actually start reading the chapters and you read each paragraph within the actual chapter, you have a list of questions that you already written down and you're like already seeking for these answers. So you're like, when you get to the imperialism part that is highlighted in the chapter, you already know all the questions that you want to ask yourself, like, well, what is this? And let me look in the book and this is the paragraph that I'm going to learn this information. And you can dive deep and dive more in depth into like, okay, well, this is what it is. This is how it is. This is what it, okay, I got it. It's answering all the questions that I have for myself. The trick is, this is part 3. This is an important tip. Do not write the answers on the piece of paper that you wrote the questions down on. Let me say that again. Do not write the answers down on the piece of paper. Don't do that. Okay? We are using active recall, so we are actively trying to pull information from our brain. We're trying to get our brain to work, so we don't want to go back, because then what we're going to end up doing is after we write all the answers to the questions, what are we going to do next? Oh, we're just going to reread the stuff that we've already written, and we're going to keep rereading, reread. And then we go back into passive learning. Don't do that. Okay? Yes. So after we write all the questions down that we have from our summary chapters, you do this for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. You always go to the summary first. Write down as many questions as you possibly can. Then you go, you read the chapter, you look for the answers that you have written down, and you remember them. What? Yes, it's so simple. You just remember it. But guess what? Phase 4 is you're going to forget what you remembered. You're going to forget it. And that is okay. And it is actually perfectly normal to forget. There is a forgetting phase within this method. You are going to forget what you remember. That is why we go back and we reread and we relearn again. Possibly it's going to be like a week later. So to combat that, what I would do is, okay, I wrote chapter 1. I have all the questions down. I've read chapter 1. I kind of found out all the answers. If I did not find out all the answers, I'm going to go back through chapter 1 and reread. And if I did not find the answers that I needed in chapter 1 after I read it twice, I'm going to go search the internet for it. I'm not moving on to chapter 2 until I search the internet to get all the answers from chapter 1 of the questions that I wrote down for myself. Period. I just did not move on because it was a lot to try to juggle everything. So then I got all this stuff. I go through the questions. I go through the answers. I know what I'm talking about. So I go through the same thing for chapter 2. But guess what? I still review chapter 1. So I'm reading the questions that I wrote, and I'm saying what the answer is out loud. Oh, well, that's this. Oh, this is why I would use that. Oh, this is how I would use this. Or this is when you use this. It makes more sense. Like chapter 1 is going to be more difficult because a lot of it's just the knowledge that you need to know. But when you get to like chapter 3, I think chapter 3 is measurements. When you get to like chapter 3 and it's dealing with measurements, then you're going to be like, well, what is duration? When do I use duration? Why would I use duration over rate? Well, when will I use rate? Well, what is rate? How often do I use rate? On what behavior should I use rate on? Should I use rate on discontinuous behaviors or non-continuous behavior? No, or continuous behavior, not non-continuous behaviors. Well, what is continuous behaviors? How do you know it's continuous behavior? Like, it gets easier once you get out of like chapter 1 because you can start asking a lot more questions of like, how do I use it? When do I use it? Well, what's the difference between this and that? Once you move on to the next chapter, you're on chapter 2, you're on chapter 3, you read it, you wrote all your questions, you didn't write the answer, but you know them. You should like start breaking down like, okay, I know this information, so you can start spacing out. You're not doing it daily as you was at the beginning. Like the first 2 weeks, you're going to be spacing it out. Whenever you review chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, you're probably reviewing those like maybe once a week or every other week at this point. That's just the spaced repetition of like, let yourself forget this information, so whenever you review it again, your brain is going to be working extremely hard to remember. You're not going back through the book and trying to look unless you completely just don't know what the answer is. The idea is you're working your brain to try to remember all this information. This is a long process in the beginning. I understand that. I went from studying like the same chapter, the same concepts, and it took like maybe 4 or 5 days of me trying to get through one chapter of like learning all of this stuff. But then after I learned it and I had the answers to all my questions, all I had to do was review, and it's like, dang, this is actually pretty simple. Like my brain right now is like really upset with this book because why is this book so thick and the concepts are so freaking simple? Once you really understand everything, it's like y'all just wasting paper at this point. Like, this is a waste of paper. Y'all could have made this book so much smaller and just used simple words, and I would have understood this really, really quick and easy once you did. But it took a while before I got to that point. So take your time, you guys. Study one chapter, break it down into as many questions as you possibly can. I promise you, this helped me so much. Again, read the summary first. Come up with as many questions about each paragraph within that summary. As many questions as you possibly can. Even if you know the answer, come up with the questions. Write them down. Go read the chapter that you wrote all them questions on. Figure out the answers to the questions that you wrote. Do not write the answers of the questions down on a piece of paper. We want to pull that information out of our own brain. That is the active recall part. We are actively retrieving the information. We are working our brain to get this information. If you have not seen why I failed my BCBA exam the first time, please go ahead and watch that video because I failed horribly by 30 points and I recovered really strong a month and a half later after only studying for 10 days. So you might want to go see that video over there. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.